Welcome to the European Parliamentary Research Service podcasts.
In this podcast, we'll talk about a potential collapse of the internet, one of the 15 risks identified and analysed by the EPRS in their Future Shocks 2023 report. Want to know more? Stay with us.
The internet consists of tens of thousands of interconnected networks based on terrestrial infrastructures, intercontinental submarine cables and satellites spanning the world, and run by service providers, individual companies, universities, and governments.
2/3 of the world's population, that's over 5 billion people, use it in their personal or professional life. That is, to make bank payments, communicate with colleagues, buy groceries online, even find a new partner.
So, what if it fails?
Well, it's something we definitely need to consider. And while a total collapse is unlikely, major disruptions could occur, and this is how.
The internet is based on the principles of interoperability, interconnection, openness, and resilience. So there are risks and vulnerabilities at different levels. An internet collapse may come from an unintentional technical failure at network, service, or application level.
But it can also come from a cyber attack led by a malicious actor or government, as we're seeing in the context of Russia's war in Ukraine, or result from a physical attack damaging telecommunication lines or critical energy infrastructure.
And we shouldn't forget about the risks of espionage and foreign state interference created by technological dependency on equipment and infrastructures provided by non-European companies and agents.
The vulnerabilities of internet infrastructure increasingly relate to the different ways the technical architecture of the internet evolves. The global internet is increasingly morphing in different cyberspaces because of technological, commercial, and political factors, and there are growing concerns about potential fragmentation into a multitude of non-interoperable and disconnected splinternets using different internet standards and protocols.
So, while internet collapse could take many forms, its effects would be felt by citizens and businesses alike, albeit at different degrees depending on disruption.
To understand this, the European Parliamentary Research Service has contemplated 3 scenarios, ranging from minor to major disruptions, and tried to draw some lessons. Here's Tambiama Mariega from the EPRS.
Occasional and transitory technical failures of the Internet's infrastructure, services or applications, caused, for instance, by natural disasters or human accidents, will likely occur. More serious disruptions, such as large-scale cyber attacks, could materialize and strongly impact people's life and the EU economy. But while such incidents are disruptive, they would not cut us out of the World Wide Web.
Things change, however, if we talk about long-lasting disruptions that could seriously compromise the economy and people's trust in the technology. Here's Stefano De Luca from the EPRS.
Based on our increased dependencies on new technologies and the popularization of future ones, such as the metaverse, the EU Agency for Cybersecurity expects a wide range of new threats to emerge by 2030, and these threats could strongly disrupt our day-to-day life, as well as business transaction and industrial production if they're not properly addressed.
These risks are not new. Let's not forget that as far back as 2007, an attack on Estonian banks, media outlets and government websites came close to bringing the country to its knees for 4 days. But it's their increased likelihood which is worrying.
Citizens are also increasingly wary of data surveillance practices by governments and the fact that internet companies extensively track their preferences across devices and services and sell them for a profit.
AI-enabled disinformation is also a cause of concern, as is the risk of a fragmented internet. That's why the EU General Data Protection Regulation, also known as GDPR, and the recent EU rules imposed on digital gatekeepers are so important to ensure consistency in the provision of internet services across Europe.
But what if a major disruption arises at global level? Stay with us.
Even if unlikely, it's possible that the world would suddenly be without internet connection due to a structural breakdown or a global war with physical and cyber attacks that would bring the internet down.
Such a general internet outage would cost the EU around €6 billion per day. Another possible scenario is a total splinternet driven by political choices made by authoritarian governments to control access to online information. And one doesn't need to search hard to find current examples of how this could look like.
In 2019, Russia centralized state control over the internet within its borders, and since the 1990s, China has been developing a Great Firewall. That is, a system of internet controls that stops citizens from connecting to banned foreign websites, and is very active in trying to change the current rules governing the global internet architecture.
The impact of a full-scale internet fragmentation could be catalytic and lead to commercial, civil, and political isolation, threatening the current globalization model. So, what can the EU do to mitigate risks and build resilience?
Well, that depends on the level of disruption. To tackle minor disruption, strengthening cooperation with other countries to fight extreme weather events that could disrupt internet infrastructure and raising awareness about cybersecurity would be useful.
To tackle moderate internet disruption, the EU would need a strong cybersecurity strategy built on collective capabilities to counter major cyber attacks and better tackle cybersecurity threats affecting critical infrastructure. Training skilled cybersecurity professionals needed by the sector would be key to protect Europe's critical infrastructure.
In this case, the EU would also need to reassure internet users that internet services are safe and their data protected against misuse. For instance, by fostering quantum-based cybersecurity solutions.
To prevent a major internet outage, the EU must primarily finance the rollout of future-proof broadband infrastructure, such as migrating to more resilient optical fiber networks, and invest in new submarine cable routes to avoid existing choke points. Also taking into consideration the threats arising from foreign direct investments into internet infrastructures.
Building its own satellite system as a backup of European internet infrastructures, as well as planning responses to potential attacks on submarine cables with military allies, could also help us avoid a total internet blackout in Europe. And investing in submarine cables, sensors, and detection systems on critical points would be a useful tool to detect potential physical threats.
Not least, the EU must act to avoid internet fragmentation and support a multilateral approach of internet governance, fostering the adoption of international communication standards in line with EU norms and principles.
So, the policy responses are as different as the scenarios considered, but in any case, a good strategy seems to be pray for the best, prepare for the worst.
Want to know more about internet collapse risks and potential responses? Check out Tambiama Madiega and Stefano De Luca's full chapters on the collapse of the internet and how to reinforce the resilience and long-term coordination of EU internet infrastructures as part of the EPRS Future Shocks 2023 study.
This is a European Parliamentary Research Service podcast.
Thanks for listening.